Hey everyone, thanks for checking in. Welcome to the TDR Traded Black podcast. Happy middle week. I am your host, Shad Dales. Still some bumping back and forth within the overall industry right now, but interest levels remain high. Today we're going to dive into some numbers that were released for the year in the state of Michigan, and this state is growing massively. As well, some lawmakers have their sights set in the state of New Jersey about psychedelics and legalizing it. And most importantly, our guest, we have probably the most well-respected and well-known analyst in the space. Pablo Zuanic is actually going to hop onto our podcast, answer some of your questions, and dive into the key metrics and companies that he likes here in the cannabis space in 2024. So let's kick things off and welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Verrill. Good to see you and happy day, sir.
Good to see you. How's it going? It's a nice little holiday on MLK Day. It's good to be back.
I noticed that little sunburn logo on the T-shirt. You made your way up, trekked up to the farm, saw Brady Cobb.
I went up to the farm with Brady. He rolled out the red carpet for us. We saw both facilities, manufacturing, cultivation, stopped by a dispensary, took the train up there, train back. It was a good day. Good day overall. I mean, they've got some magic going on with the plants.
Who was all there? So it was you, Brady, anybody else?
It was just me and Brady
Nice.
that were up there for the day.
Nice. He's got a good story going, that's for sure. I've had him on a couple times, but the growers that we met at MJ Biz back in early December.
Saw Tyler. Saw all those guys up there. They've all got they actually just built out. They expanded their extraction facility. So they've got a lot of stuff going on there. It was they're putting a lot of emphasis in extracts, which is smart, because as you see these markets mature, especially going to adult use, with Florida having adult use right around the corner, I mean, extracts start to become an integral part of the market as the consumers mature. So it's great to see. I mean, it's one of the companies that I'm a patient, so I mean, I usually buy their product.
Yeah.
It was nice to go up and see how everything is made back of the house and meet a bunch of people that were up there.
Yeah. They brought some growers even from the West Coast, including Colorado, over, so you can understand why their product is selling strong in the state of Florida. But kudos to Brady Cobb and the crew. And most importantly, this is the TDR Traded Black podcast. I am your host, Shad Dales. So set off the top, we're going to bring some things in about Michigan, New Jersey pertaining to psychedelics. And the guest of the day, Pablo Zuanic, is actually going to join us. It'll be interesting to see some of his takes on some of the companies he likes and trends, rescheduling, all that sort of stuff. So we'll dive into that with him in just a moment. But as I said, this is Into the Wire. We basically outline the headlines in cannabis and psychedelics. To begin, news from the state of Michigan, and what a year it was for the state, and the amount of cannabis sold both on the recreational and medical side of things. Anthony, break it down on the numbers that were recently announced for the year and where Michigan currently ranks in the country among them.
So Michigan cracked $3 billion for the year. In 2023, $3.06 billion, about $305 per person for every person in the state that's eligible to buy cannabis. This is a great number. I mean, there's a lot of MSOs that have exposure there, most notably Curaleaf, Verano, Ascend, TerraSend, and Cresco.
Yeah.
Cresco having a large share of the wholesale market there. TerraSend having the Gage and the Cookies brand, a large retail presence. And just an overall large footprint in the state. Curaleaf, Verano, and Ascend are participants there as well. I mean, $3 billion for Michigan is impressive.
Yeah.
It's eclipsed a lot of other larger markets in the country. It caught my eye, and I mean, it's something that I'm going to pay a lot of attention to, especially as I think the current market participants that are there from an MSO perspective are going to start to go deeper into that market, because bringing on incremental retail at a certain margin makes a lot of sense in a state like Michigan, especially when revenues continue to ramp.
Yeah, well, when we speak to the TerraSend crew, you can understand why they are diving deep within that state based on these latest numbers. They probably don't want too much attention around because, let's face it, what an opportunity. Now you can understand why as they start to explain more and more the opportunity that's at hand within that state. That's some staggering numbers, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. Gage was one of the first investments that I made in the U.S. space, which was in Michigan. Lo and behold, TerraSend wound up picking them up. So, I mean, I'm obviously a shareholder of TerraSend, full disclosure. But I mean, yeah, I've been bullish on Michigan from the beginning, and watching it kind of grow as a market, and for it to now eclipse $3 billion. I didn't have those expectations for the Michigan market, but it's amazing to see. And it's foreshadowing for how powerful these adult use markets can get to. So, I mean, just imagine what happens when a Pennsylvania comes online, when a Virginia comes online. We're going to start to see what happens with Ohio, which I'm not expecting Ohio to be as booming as Michigan. But I do expect to see solid numbers out of Ohio with their adult use market flipping.
That'll happen in due time, though. I think Ohio's got more people than the state of Michigan, is it not?
From my understanding, it is more populous than Michigan.
Yeah.
It is. And I mean, the other market that caught my attention was Maryland. Maryland did 1.6, or Maryland did 800 million in sales from July to the end of December. So, I mean, on a forward 12 run rate, you're talking about a potential $1.6 billion market for the state of Maryland, which that also has decent MSO exposure, which is Curaleaf, the Cannabis, GTI, TerraSend, and MariMed.
Yeah.
So Maryland being a small state, it does have pretty deep MSO exposure, and they are tracking. I would forecast they're probably going to do about over $1.5 billion in revenue for 2024 with a full year of adult use.
Yeah. Conversation we had last week with BDSA Analytics. It's basically the leading analytics report provider for the cannabis space, but they were saying around 30% of Michiganders tried cannabis at one time in their life back in 2021. Fast forward 3 years later, and that number is at almost 55%. So the word is out. Cannabis is quickly becoming a popular product amongst the people within that state of Michigan, to say the least.
Oh yeah, I mean, people are kind of curious. People want to try edibles. People want to try low dose cannabis solutions. A lot of it's not smoking like you would think. I mean, they more so want to get into the vapes, into the edibles, more so the beginner products. And I mean, that's good. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. The social stigma is gone. I mean, people are curious to try cannabis and see how they could implement it in some facet of their life.
Yeah. BTW 3006, Alex Stetson, Richard Baldwin, Alex Solstice, Thomas Shea, Andrew Russell, all great questions for Pablo. We're going to have that coming up in just a moment. I'll make sure to ask those questions. This is the TDR Trade of Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with TDR co-host Anthony Vera. Let's switch now to headline number 2, where interesting news amongst lawmakers. They actually passed, I think they legalized cannabis in New Jersey. What was it, back in 2021, if memory serves me correctly? And now here in 2024, they have their sights set on psychedelics. Do you want to elaborate on what I mean by that?
Yeah, so there is legislation in New Jersey to allow for treatment centers and the manufacturing of psilocybin based therapies. This is a framework that was written in 2023. It was taken off to be revised. That revised version is now making its rounds in the New Jersey legislature. This looks like it's going to pass. If it does pass, there'll be psychedelic-assisted therapy centers in New Jersey, specifically to psilocybin. So very much so like what we're seeing in Colorado, California. These states are taking a cautious approach. They're taking a medicinal approach, and they're leading with psilocybin, which I don't want to read too much into it, but that could say that could give way into really what's going on with the psychedelic companies that are developing drugs. Like maybe there is going to be a focus on psilocybin moving forward, but lo and behold, it's a step in the right direction for New Jersey. I'm sure it's going to be focused towards vets, occupational therapy. And people that actually want an alternative to big pharma are going to be able to access the alternative to big pharma sooner rather than later in the state of New Jersey.
MAPS gets that FDA approval for the NDA submission at some point this year. I think lawmakers are going to turn everywhere in every state, don't you think?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think there's going to be sweeping reform around psychedelics. It reminds me of cannabis in 2012, 2014. We're starting to get incremental, very slow reform, and then it all just starts to snowball, and then just becomes common practice sooner or later.
Yeah. All right, let's now shift. This was Into the Wire, outlining the biggest headlines of cannabis and psychedelics. TDR Trade of Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with Anthony Verrill. Let's now switch to segment number 2, which is our guest of the day. He is without a doubt one of the most recognizable and respected analysts, if not the most respected analyst in the space. Mitch, let's bring in Mr. Pablo Zuanic from Zuanic Associates. Pablo, good day, sir, and finally great to have you on the podcast for the first time. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me and for that introduction, Shad and Anthony. I like to think I'm just one of the out of focus guys. But again, thanks for those kind words.
I know your work is much respected and it's much appreciated. Throughout the sector for some time now.
I think before we get into specific companies, got a lot of people asking about what companies you like and why, and I'm sure you get asked that probably 100 times every single day. But where do you think we are in the state of cannabis? There's been a lot of ups and downs, volatility to say the least. How long have you been following the space now?
For about 5 years. My background is mostly in the consumer sector in equity research, but cannabis about, in a very detailed and close way, about 5 years.
Okay.
But in terms of the question, where we are, you would think that we're in a great point, in a great entry point in terms of the upside the sector could have, right? And I would say, I think about it in two ways. One, if we go back and look at for example, the MSOS price chart as a proxy, we peaked at 55 with MSOS ETF February 2021 after the Biden election and the Georgia runoffs, right? And here we are, 4 to 8 recently in this range. So based on what expectations have been in the past, we are way below where we were. And if you think long term, the upside could be significant. The second point I'd say is that, the rescheduling news is significant. It cannot be overstated, right? You have 50 years that cannabis has been in Schedule 1 with the CSA since 1970, 71. Lots of people went to jail for it. And now the federal government, it's telling you it's Schedule 3. And this is just 7 years ago in 2016, the FDA and the HHS they couldn't get it out of Schedule 1, right? They couldn't make an argument. And as we saw this weekend, thanks to some very entrepreneurial attorneys, we have the details, and here they are with very solid arguments and evidence that it should be Schedule 3. Yeah. So when you put all that together, I think that investors, whether retail institutions, social media, I think everyone is right to be very excited about what could come next.
Think about that, 50 years. And I was going to ask, how big is this? It's big, needless to say. But, did you get a chance to review some of the documentation last week that was released to the public? What really grabbed your attention? And there was a lot there that, for many that did.
Yeah. Yeah, no, obviously, we went through the details. But what I would say, number one, the fact that marijuana has a potential for abuse less than the drugs or other substances in Schedule 1 and 2, that's significant. Number two, marijuana has a currently accepted medical use in treatment, mostly for pain in the US. And number three, abuse of marijuana may lead to moderate or low physical dependence, right? Those, I'm repeating what were the three main conclusions, but that was significant. And again, this is it's easy for some to say that this is a political process, and yes, there's some truth in that, right? President Biden ordered the scheduling review in October 2022. Took about a year for the FDA and HHS to come out with a recommendation. They did their homework, a very thorough document with a lot of evidence again, which I think is persuasive. And now here we are, they are passing it on to the DEA. So I think that it's easy, again, I repeat, it's easy to say it's a political process, that it's an election and all of that, but a lot of effort has gone into it. Now, staying on the subject that it's political, I think, in my opinion, it would be political suicide for the administration to take this far, right, in terms of the evidence, the study, and to pass it on to the DEA to get then rebuffed by the FDA, by the DEA, right? So we can argue about the timing. When does the DEA come out with their observations around the document? But I think it has to happen now soon in the next few months. But again, in terms of my read of the document, very positive, very persuasive. We can nitpick, right? You could say, well, it's only one condition, neuropathic pain, right? Okay. Or that there could be some psychological dependence. But overall, very positive. I like the way that they use alcohol also as a comparator, right? To strengthen the case for cannabis. So I think it's all good and great. Now, if you add to that, right, we all know that when you think about cannabis, there's it's a three-pronged approach, right? There's the executive branch, what they're doing with the scheduling review. That's great. There's the efforts going on in Congress, with safe banking or safer and other bills. And then, of course, you have the judicial branch. Clarence Thomas, pretty much in his minority opinion in June 2021, wrote the blueprint, right? And you have now David Boies with a lawsuit. So I think that there's great momentum. And if I'll come back to your questions, but I always say, when I'm in this type of forums, this is a very volatile sector, right? There's a lot of day trading. There's a lot of technical imperfections in terms of low liquidity, no custody, stocks trading over the counter. The ETFs, they do a great job, right? But they are also a sort of distortion because they account for a large percentage of the volume. So it's a difficult sector to invest in on a day-to-day basis. But the long term, it's difficult to understate the positive, right? You were talking about Michigan, and if you let me go with this metric, say long term, this is obviously a real industry, right? With close to 30 billion in sales, we should get to 40 billion at the current pace of legalization by 2027. That's even assuming that Florida and Pennsylvania are still medical, right? So you have significant momentum. But at some point, if this is legal on a nationwide basis, and you take Michigan per cap on the population, you get to a market, close to 110 billion. Yeah. But again, we keep saying, in a legal market, with less stigma, more product innovation, catering to different consumers, different occasions, with wider distribution, a more rational tax policy in terms of sales taxes, interstate trade, a better industry, you're talking 150 billion, in my opinion. And then you add the international markets. And just to stop on that point, and I know that may sound very bullish long term, but we think it's realistic. Let's remember, the illegal market is probably 70 billion, 75 billion, right? 70 to 80 billion. So you have a market already about 100 billion. We are converting illicit to legal. But then on top of that, you have what I call the growth that would come from innovation and greater acceptance. You assume a company with 20% market share on that, 25%, apply a wholesale adjuster 0.5, 25 or 20% EBITDA margins, 25 valuation EBITDA multiple, which is probably conservative. You're talking about companies $120 billion.
Yeah.
In terms of market cap, there's only 5 companies that have more than 1 billion market cap in the US, right? Probably the largest, 3 billion, Tilray on the Canadian side. But big picture, the upside long term is significant. Now, if you ask me in the short term, I always say, it's a tough sector to play in, and I really, respectfully, I'm not the best at day trading, right? People can argue, okay, MSOS is down today. Why? It should be up. Yeah. But I think if you're patient and you take a long-term view, it's a great sector to be in.
Yeah.
100%. So when you say long-term view, with your background in CPG, do you think that we get to a point, let's say 5 to 8 years down the road, where you could walk into a Circle K or walk into a 7-Eleven and just show your ID, grab a pack of joints, and you're on your way? Or do you think that we stay in this insulated, high moat retail environment that we're in right now, and it stays with that degree of regulation?
Right. I think it becomes more normalized, right? Taking a long-term 10-year view. But that's meaning, yes, it's wider distribution, Circle K, 7-Eleven, pharmacies, a more bifurcated market between medical and recreational. So yes, I think long-term it would be that way. But I think that's part of a problem here, right? Because when we think, one of the debates, it's about institutional investors, right? Yep. And how active are they in the space? How do they think about the space? And one of the questions is that, yes, we all agree that the MSOs trading about 8 times EBITDA, are cheap in general, that they don't reflect the long-term potential of the industry. I just gave the example, a company in this space could be 120 billion 10 years out, even earlier, and you have stocks, very few over 1 billion. 3 billion max. So the long-term upside is significant. The question is choosing the right companies, right? But on that question of long-term, the very bearish view is that today you have this very protected industry in terms of every state being an island, no interstate trade, licenses very limited, that can make up for very good economics, right? But in the long term, how does that change, right? So the bear thesis, which I don't agree with, but the bear thesis is that buying an MSO, the bear would tell you, is like buying a house with a great view of the beach, and then suddenly somebody puts a huge building in front of you, and the value of your house has gone down because you don't have that view anymore.
Right.
I disagree with that bear thesis, because what's happening today is that the well-managed companies, the ones that are disciplined, that are benefiting from those limited license states are taking those funds and investing in such a way and growing in such a way that they're going to buy that building that's going to be in front of them. And that building will be much bigger than a house and have a view of the beach, right? So I think the important thing, and I'm speaking in general more than stock specific, is that yes, these economics, this regulatory system, very regulated markets, license restricted, especially east of the Mississippi, allow for some companies to become quite powerful in terms of resources and able to grow. But going back to Anthony's question, yes, in the future, I think the world changes, right? But that's very long term, and most people say irrelevant. Let's talk about the short term. And what I mean in the long term, right? The way it changes, you probably have interstate trade, right? You probably have wider distribution. In the case of alcohol and beer, maybe you have a three-tier system, right? Let's remember, in the case of California, when they went from medical to rec, the proposition to change from medical to rec was that California would be a tier system. In the end, that didn't go through, and you can have vertical operators, right, which are in a great place, like say Gulf Flora. But again, the big picture, I think that over time, the markets long term will become more competitive, more like beer and alcohol, perhaps tiered, and then you're looking for companies again with the stronger brands.
Yeah.
But I'll come back to. I'll let you, I guess, ask your question. But what I will come back is that. So I want to be clear. I have a very positive long-term view of where this industry is going, and I think what happened over the weekend was tremendous news, and it cannot be understated. Now, if we go back to the day trader, right, to people that are asking what's going to happen with these stocks tomorrow, okay, my answer would be, first of all, I'm not the right guy because I'm more focused on the way it's on building research for institutional investors. But the way I would think about is what is the chain of events that's going to happen over the next few months, and then aside, think of what are the potential scenarios on those events, and assign probabilities to those events, right? And then let's try to ask ourselves what's priced in. The question of what's priced in this sector because of volatility, it's difficult to answer many times, but because of the inefficiencies I talked at the beginning. But in terms of the chain of events, I assign high probability to the DEA coming out with an announcement that they accept the recommendation of the HHS, whether they do that through a leak again, like what happened in late August, or they send the answer to the DOJ and the DOJ puts out the reply out there. I think that the very high probability that we will get that, in the next few months. The second part of the chain of event is what happens once the DOJ has that recommendation, right? Do they announce a framework of how that's going to be implemented?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Right? And that's something that we will have to see, and obviously. But anyway, so that's it. And then of course, does it get enacted, and do we get the removal of 280 right away, or not? And whatever they do, is this something that has durability, right? If there's, let's say, a change of administration, and we are with a new president in November, what does that mean to that process, right? But again, I think that it's important for investors to think about the chain of events, assign probabilities to those scenarios, and then in terms of thinking about investments, say on a 12-month view. If people are trying to just trade the sector, I think that, and it's hard to judge how bad is a pullback, right? You had a 3% drop today; it's nothing after the almost 40% gains we've had over the last, call it 2 weeks. I think the important thing is that, in the next weeks or months, you will get a positive headline about a DEA reply, and that will push stocks up again.
I agree.
Then how meaty is that recommendation? Meaning, how much legs does that recommendation have in terms of how it's going to be implemented, and in terms of the framework that it will carry? That will probably dictate more how stocks behave.
Pablo, how much conversations are you having with institutions? Like, are they watching this right now in anticipation as to news that could come down later this year? To your point, if we got rescheduling, are they watching this closely?
Yes, they are watching closely, but I want to and doing their homework and paying a lot of attention. And we can tell that based on the inbound calls. We can tell that based on readership. But what I'd say on that point is that they probably want evidence, right? People have been burned before. We've been here before. I think Boris Jordan in your program has said, also Coralif, right, that at the time of his IPO, he had a lot of institutions involved. I think that we have to have real evidence that things will change for the better, and then they will get involved. You look at the TSX, TerraSen, Curaleaf.
So when you say evidence, that means more than just a rescheduling announcement, right?
Yeah, something that's going to stay, whether it's an act of Congress that has more legs, or in the case of the rescheduling news, something that's, I would say fully implemented, right? Meaning, and let's say, what's the best case scenario, right? So you have the DEA come out and say, yes, we agree with Schedule 3. The DOJ comes out with a framework that says this is going to be implemented, whether they leave the state by state plan or they apply some federal language around it. But the most important thing is that the DOJ provides a framework that will remove 280E pretty much with immediate effect, that will allow for more research, that will provide safe harbor language that allows maybe banks to become more involved in the space, and even have language there that allows the exchanges to feel compelled or to feel that they have enough in that language to actually uplist stocks, right? So I think that type of evidence, the uplisting of stocks, is probably the most important for the institution. So I would say yes, they are there, they are doing their homework, ready to jump in, but I wouldn't think that happens in the short term. You saw the volume of Curaleaf, TerraSen in the TSX. I know it's very recent. We're talking about 1 million, 2 million, right? So it's still small figures. So I think that yes, they are there, they are doing their homework, but I think that in the short term, it's more challenging, right? So it's still the retail investors. And the last thing I'll say on the subject, because it's easy, I talked about that price chart that I look at so much, MSOS at 55, came down to 4 or 5, and then now we're at 8 something. So that tells you that, of course, there's upside, right? That at some points the stocks will behave that way again. But it also reminds me of the responsibility that a lot of us have, not just myself, of those people that bought at 55 and now are holding that back, right?
Yeah.
A teacher, maybe a dentist, maybe a grandmother, an uncle, or someone that invested and lost 90% of their holdings. So I think that it's good. It's when we all get excited about the capital flows into the sector, the question is, where are they coming from? Is it institutions? I don't think so. Is it retail investors? Well, if they got burned, how are they gonna be putting in more money there? So sure, we want to hope that more retail investors will get involved in the space. So it's nice to see Bitcoin influencers in social media. It's nice to see, Reddit with MSOS ETF trending. Those are good things because you're going to get more retail involvement, right? But I think, again, that's what I'm saying. I'm getting off topic. I'm probably talking about something that's way out of my league in the sense of...
No, it's all helpful information.
Predicting day trading here, it's tough, right? But if you want to trade, I think that, the DA announcement will happen. Stocks will move up, and then we'll have to see the detail, the fine print, right? To see how good is it. The last thing I'll add on the subject is a question about the bifurcation of medical and rec, right? You asked me about, what I thought about the document. We wrote a very detailed report on Monday that we published. It's available online on my Twitter account. Something that's part of the debate is, if we reschedule, do they bifurcate cannabis or not? The conventional wisdom narrative is that they will not, that pretty much everything will stay the same. 280 goes away, the state programs remain in place. Essentially nothing changes except that there's more room for research, but it remains federally illegal. But again, so that's the conventional narrative. I have some concerns and disagreement with that narrative, because again, I have not been able to find one drug, or we can call it drug, chemical compound, or substance that is Schedule 3 for which you don't need an RX doctor prescription, where it's ketamine, anabolic steroids, testosterone, other things in Schedule 3.
Point. Very good point.
So the issue is that my problem is that there's no CSA for Minnesota and a CSA for Michigan. There's only one federal CSA. So I think that the DOJ is that's gonna be interesting how they deal with that. I'm curious.
Do you think that gets fixed? Do you think that gets fixed with a memo to kind of clear that out coming from one of the AGs?
Yeah. I'm skeptical, because if I'm Eli Lilly or some pharmaceutical company standing out there, I'm going to say, well, you know what? Let's start having drugs in Georgia that can be prescribed with a recommendation, right? Which is a name that we use in the industry.
Good point. Good point.
Recommendation. So look, I mean, it's part of a debate, right? It's part of a debate in terms of how are they going to get around it? But if you ask me for a base case scenario, and again, it's tough to make predictions in this industry. What I keep saying in terms of my base case scenario is that you get the DEA announcement. Whether it leaks or it goes to the DOJ, makes it, that happens. In terms of whether they come out with a full framework and all the details, because I'm sure the DOJ right now, remember the science comes from the FDA and the HHS, the DEA have to they'll probably come out with implementation to some extent, have a lot to say there. I think they will get into that issue of bifurcation and how do you put it in Schedule 3 and how do you deal with recreational cannabis. In the 252-page document, they talk a lot about, they do talk about recreational versus, they call it non-medical versus medical. Yeah. So I'm just saying that you get to a point that that perhaps they realize that they need to reschedule medical cannabis. You may have to change the way it's prescribed. You may have more FDA oversight. You may need to deschedule recreational cannabis. In my opinion, it gets complicated. Is there enough process for a public comment period for for them to agree in terms of how they're going to implement it? I think it's difficult, right? From my perspective, politically, the 252-page document is very powerful. They've done their homework. If they can get to June and say, look, the DEA has approved this and we're going to move forward. But then, Biden will say, well, re-elect me and I'll complete the job, right? So again, we can argue whether, what that means for stocks. But I'm just saying, yes, short term, you get the pop because of the DEA announcement. And then let's see how it's implemented or how they say they will implement it. And that will also have some effect in terms of how stocks behave. But again, that's why I say day trading, tough, but long-term, very positive.
Yeah, hats off to those attorneys that brought that lawsuit. We're actually going to have Matt Zorn, that was at the forefront of those lawsuits, on tomorrow to talk more about it. But listen, there's a bunch of people with some questions. I want to reach out to our audience, kind of put you on the spot. I know we're interested to learn more of some of the key metrics that you look for of specific companies. But one of our viewers writes, since Fire and Flower has gone under, I wonder if Pablo has changed his opinion regarding High Tide's business model, since he liked Fire and Flower over High Tide, yet High Tide has been winning. We put you on the spot. Yeah. What's your response to that?
No problem. Look, I mean, if I it's my own company now, right? But if, normally we have a compliance lawyer next to me when I'm in a type of forum like this. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to talk about stocks I'm not covering right now that I covered in the past. But that I would say that, sure, High Tide, it's yeah. So I probably shouldn't answer that question, all right? But yeah, Fire Flower, it's no longer around. It's been acquired by another operator in Canada, right? But yeah, I'll pass on that question if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries. What's your take? Somebody else writes, what's Pablo think about Nicholas Vita, Cannabis CEO, retiring?
Yeah, you have, again, another stock that I don't cover. I'm sorry to be I think that, I'll step back in a second. There's a number of CEOs in the industry that have been visionaries, right? That they put the different businesses together, different assets, and they build companies that are in a good place right now. In the case of Columbia Care, Virginia, New Jersey, New Jersey went rec, Virginia could go rec. And in all these companies, as they go through a process, there will be management changes, right? CEOs.
12 years is a long time for a CEO in this space, right?
Say that again.
I said 12 years.
Yeah,
that's a long time.
In this industry.
So Pablo, when you're conducting research and you're initiating coverage on a company, like what are you looking for within that company, and how do you get your research started and then get to a point where you're like, all right, I've covered the company. The research is sound. Let's go public with this.
Sure. I'll tell you, like, for example, I'll mention MariMed, right? We launched coverage on that. So the way I'm thinking of right now, it's if I want to have an overweight on a stock, the question is this stock going to work even if there's no significant change in terms of reform news flow, right? Yeah. So I'm looking there at three metrics in simple terms. I'm looking at one, what's the growth prospects for this company, right? And that may come because they have exposure to interesting states, Virginia or Maryland or New Jersey for some, right? Or it may be because they have a very relevant organic growth programs, right? In the case of MariMed, they are benefiting from Maryland going rec. They are benefiting from expansion plans in Illinois. with their kitchen and cultivation, and then an acquisition in Missouri. So one is the top line growth in terms of what's driving that in terms of organic expansion, but also exposure to states that are going from medical to rec. You mentioned before, you gave some examples, but some states obviously leap more than others in terms of med to rec because of depending how developed the medical program was. So number one, I'm looking at that growth, and then the potential for margins to improve, right? Are your margins in the mid-teens, and suddenly they can be north of 20%? Because obviously rec, it's a more profitable market, less competitive, restricted. So that's number one, the growth. Then the valuation, right? On my numbers, say a stock like MariMed trades about 1.2 times sales. Till Holdings, which also have an overweight, trades about less than 1 time sales. And the average for MSOs is north of 2 times, right? So I'm looking at valuation. And then number three, so I say, the growth potential in terms of top line, but earnings. Number two, the valuation. And then number three, they have to pass a sniff test, right? Meaning, corporate governance, share-based compensation, debt leverage, right? For some companies, it's quite high. So those are three metrics I look at, and that, for example, underpins my recommendations on, say, a MariMed or a Till Holdings. We launched recently on 2 California operators, Gold Flora, State House Holdings. We study California very closely because, again, I think the U.S. cannabis market one day will look like California, right? Most MSOs have exited California, but you have vertical operators there that are in a good position, expanding stores and having vertical operations, and I think in a good position to consolidate and acquiring brands. So I think that
with someone
in California or Michigan,
with someone like a State House, I guess, what's your view on their current debt position versus the value of the equity as it stands right now?
Right, sure. I mean, State House. We launched on State House on a neutral comment because of the high debt leverage, right, and the challenges they have with the interest expense, and of course the taxes from 280E that makes it difficult to deleverage, right? But again, long term, State House has a good position in terms of the brands they have and the potential to consolidate that industry. But again, California, it's supposed to be a tough market, but we see opportunities for companies there to consolidate. But in terms of Gold Flora, we have an overweight. State House, we started with neutral, but those are, stepping back, those are the type of metrics we look at, right? Growth potential, valuation, and then sure, balance sheet is very important. But if we step back again, stepping back on 280E, which we obviously it's a huge burden on the industry, right? Some of the top operators, are paying 70%, 80% tax on effective tax rates, right? When you should be paying like 21%, the statutory tax rate. But the big picture is that so if that goes away, that makes a significant difference. And we wrote a report where, and again, when you take the savings, right, there's different ways to analyze that, but the savings in terms of cash flow, if you multiply them by a 5-10 times multiple, and then compare that to the market cap, we highlighted that State House, companies like Jushi, State House, would be some of the largest beneficiaries in terms of the cash flow savings relative to our market cap. I think Anthony Coniglio, which we have companies, New Lake Capital Partners, he made it, that for them, even for a company providing ancillary services, whether you're Weed Maps on the tech side or you are Chicago Atlantic or New Lake on the finance side, if your clients are in better shape financially, their credit worthiness is better, or they will be in a better position to fund expansion plans. That's good for everybody, right? It's good for myself also in terms of my business. It's good for Weed Maps. It's good for the Chicago, the New Lake capitals of the world. So I'm just saying that the removal of 280, obviously, it's very significant. All that said, I think I give a lot of credit to someone like Kim Rivers, right, in terms of Trulieve, in terms of taking action, right? Because, and I think she set a precedent here that others have started to follow. And what I mean by this, you have the government telling you that this should be Schedule 3. August 28, the HHS document is out, right? You have David Boyes with the lawsuit. You have Clarence Thomas, June 2021. So some companies are taking action, right? Whether it's some are not paying the taxes or working with a different provision rate. And I have nothing against that. And in my opinion, I think they're doing the right thing, because it's I mean, I had the quote here somewhere that I really love from Clarence Thomas. I guess I won't find it now, but the one that sorry, just 1 second.
All good.
The word that he used, a patchwork, right? The word that he used, the half-in, half-out regime that strains basic principles of federalism and conceals traps for the unwary. I mean, again, we'll see how the legal plays out, right? In terms of it can be a 2-year process. All that said, again, I think that Jason Wilder said it, and other people have said it. Let's see what happens January 23rd, right? And Matt Thorne may answer also that in your call. The David Boyes team and the DOJ team agreed, I think late December, to extend the process until January 23rd, right? So they have until the 23rd to come out, and the DOJ has to decide whether they file a motion to dismiss and whether the process extends itself to April. But again, stepping back, there's a lot going on, right? Whether it's Congress, whether it's judicial, whether it's a DOJ. So there's reasons to be optimistic, but I think investors have to be patient, look for the entry points, and perhaps not check Twitter every single hour, or not check the MSOS price chart every single hour of the trading day. Just sit back and take a medium-term view. But I think that a year from now we'll be I believe that we will be in a better place. Question mark, of course, is the election. I mean, that's another subject, right?
Yeah. Somebody else writes, is there any MSO1, tier 1 or tier 2 companies that you like? Feel free to comment. If you don't want to give out specific companies, that's fine. But thought I would reach out and ask you that question based on one of our viewers.
Yeah, no, we like Green Thumb, right? We have a soft spot for Green Thumb. I'll say it on the tier 1. And I guess I would say this in a way. They get on with the job, right? They don't make a lot of noise. They are not available for a lot of forums. I'll give you an example. I was in Rhode Island about a weekend ago, and I think it was the day before a storm or something. Although 3 inches is nothing there, but a year ago, their store in Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a state where there's only seven stores, so they all do very well, most of them. A year ago, that store was like an industrial park next to a Gen, not a good location, not a lot of traffic near the airport. Now it's in a great location in Warwick, very accessible, a building, next to a diner, separate building from a diner with car parking from 3 sides. There were 70 people inside, and you probably had to wait an hour to get your order. And then you had like 50 people on the line outside. So it's a huge transformation from what they did a year ago. They moved there on August 2nd. The only reason I bring that up, although it's anecdotal, they get on with the job and they do it very well, right? And they've been very disciplined in terms of investing the gains from the license restrictive markets and expanding at the right time into states like Virginia or Minnesota, and waiting for those states to go reg. So tier 1, in terms of the stocks that we cover at the moment, yes, I would highlight Green Thumb.
Yeah. I think everybody highlights Green Thumb.
Yeah.
Do you follow some of our viewers? This company has like a lot of very passionate investors, to say the least. But do you follow SNDL much at all and know much about their story?
Yeah, again, if I had my compliance, I do have someone that used to work at SEC, is my, of course, outside counsel. They always say, be very careful about answering questions about stocks I don't cover, right?
I gotcha.
I think that what I would say more in general is that the Canadian LP, I guess 2 things on the Canadian LPs, right? Back in the day, the Canadian LPs like SNDL, Canopy Growth, Tilray were ways for very liquid ways for investors to play U.S. reform news flow, right? And they were much larger and move more than the U.S. stocks that trade over the counter. Over time, because of disappointments with shareholder dilution or performance, people have shied away from the LPs to play the US market. I think the MSOS ETF also plays a part. You have a more liquid vehicle to play the US market than, say, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. So again, I think that the way people think about the Canadian companies is different. But again, Zach George at SNDL, he benefited 2 or 3 years ago from raising almost $1 billion.
Yes, he did.
Because the stock begins with a meme stock, and they've been cautious about the way they invested that, in cannabis assets, in retail, in finance companies, and I think what's interesting about the Canadian space is that almost every company is very different in terms of their story.
Yeah.
Compared to MSOs that we can talk about them tier 1, tier 2, or 3, but in terms of their shape, the MSOs have similar models. What the difference is mostly a state exposure. Without being very brief, in the case of the Canadian space, I mean, we have 2 stocks that we rate overweight: Village Farms and Decibel. Shout out to Village Farms, probably one of the most efficient producers in the world, right? Low cost producer of flower. Decibel, a leading producer in infused pre-rolls, selling at prices below Jeter in California, right? I mean, they sell in Canada, obviously. What I'm trying to say here, you have a pre-roll producer in Canada that dominates the pre-rolled infused category, about 50% market share, and they're able to do it with prices below what pre-rolls with Jeter sells pre-rolls in California. So again,
big picture, Jeter.
It's
you cover Jeter on the private side.
Yeah, we pay attention to all of them, right? And we're in touch with a number of operators there. What I've learned, again, I mean, my I guess maybe, I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I always remind myself, and I guess it's naive to say it, this is a real industry, right?
Yeah.
I do my store checks and my traffic checks. I recall standing, outside cannabis stores in Scranton, Pennsylvania, about 8 months ago, Wednesday at 12 p.m., counting people going in and going out. Yes, I do try to hire interns to do that, but sometimes I do it myself. But you see a lady walking in with a 3-year-old toddler. You see a dad holding a baby in his arms. You see the veteran coming with a dog. I mean, it's an industry that's providing services, right? And the consumers are real. Yeah. So it's so I think that it's important to remember that. Yeah. But again, yeah.
I think what you said earlier, when you combine some of the biggest companies in the space right now at a current, $3 billion, $4 billion market cap in total amongst some of the bigger players, and that you said the potential here could be well over 100 billion.
I believe that.
I think, and you think it's realistic as well. I think that's the real reason why so many people, realize the volatility in this industry, but are sticking out as strong as they are, because let's all face it, people that have followed this space closely, even though their portfolios could be down 90%, realize what the gains could eventually be in due time. But time has obviously been its biggest enemy for a lot of people in this space. It just can't come fast enough, right?
Yeah.
Listen, I appreciate you checking in and outlining some of the key metrics and some of the companies that you highlighted. But listen, mad respect for you and what you've done for the industry. I know that you're well-established, recognized, and respected amongst many in the industry. And I hope our viewers got a good chance to, let's not focus so much on the day trading and look at this as the long-term trajectory, because there's a lot of growth. And listen, let's have you on again sometime soon, right after some rescheduling news, if that happens, right?
Yeah. No, thank you for inviting me. Again, I think I'm more in focus now, so that's good. Yeah.
Thanks,
you for joining us, Pablo.
Appreciate your time.
Bye.
Yeah. A lot of information, but you can understand why he's doing what he's doing. Listen, before we let everybody go, just want to let everybody know that we're actually going to be speaking to Matt Zorn, the attorney that filed the lawsuit that basically gave us all that information regarding the HHS last week. So we're going to talk to him tomorrow and have that posted up next week. So make sure to come back to our channel. For those watching right now for the first time, we are a content platform that introduces to you the biggest names in the cannabis space, as this industry is poised to blow up and take off, not only in cannabis, psychedelics as well, in the crypto space. That'll wrap up for today. Feel free to leave any comments below. What did you want to mention?
We've got Dan the Chart Man on Friday.
Dan the Chart Man
round out the week
on
from the
Friday.
From the Chart Guys will be joining us. So anybody that wants any insight into any names that they're looking at or has any questions for Dan, shoot us a DM or be on the stream, and we'll be happy to answer them live on Friday.
Yes, good point. All right, quick recap. Michigan, 300 billion, or it's not 300 billion, 3 billion in sales for 2023. As well, lawmakers have their sights set up in New Jersey. And then Pablo Zuanic says, keep calm, long and strong regarding this space. This is $100 billion plus industry in the making. This is the TDR Trade of Black podcast. Anthony, good day. I'm your host, Shad Dales.
We'll
see you guys back later this week.
Tomorrow.
Yes, Matt Zorn and Dan the Chartman later this week. Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here